There, now it doesn't look so bad. Welcome to just normal Jezza news, everyone. Seriously, trust me, it's all normal here. No nudity. If that disappoints you, you may want to find someone else. I have no place for this. Before I start with today's video, I'd like to do a small little Q&A section. Jasmine says, close your blinds. The dark outside world makes me nervous. Not a problem, my fishy friend. This one time I'll do something special just for you. See, now I like that. That's better than the never-ending darkness of the Tyrone Cavelands. Tyrone said he'd be back by now. I'm stuck down here. Anyways, here we are with the long-anticipated Part 9 of Animal Collective August. I say long-anticipated because this is by far their most popular album. Merriweather post Pavilion! Oh crud, I didn't mean to expose that. Ever since the early 00s, Animal Collective have been on an upward slope in terms of quality. Their sound continued to become more defined, more distinct, more poppy and accessible. After a lot of experimentation, they really started to key in on what made them work so well, the elements that the group did best. And with the group's 2007 album Strawberry Jam, they realized they were pretty good at pop. I personally feel as though Strawberry Jam was their peak, but there's definitely still a very noticeable and positive progression from Strawberry Jam to Merriweather post Pavilion. Before I even talk about it though, I gotta mention, Deacon's not on this album. And you can tell too, he's usually their guitarist, but there's not that much live instrumentation on this album. Strawberry Jam used to be their most electronic album, but then this one came along, and it took that electronic production and fully expanded upon it. Even more reliance on synths and loops and samples. Structurally, it's a very rhythmic album. There's all kinds of drum samples, and the electronics have a very punchy sound to them. Oftentimes there may be several synth arpeggios with a bunch of tribal drum samples underneath. And because of how much it relies on rhythm and percussion for the instrumentals, it often gives a very jungle-like feeling. Despite how electronic this album is, it can sound very natural and wild. Some songs like No More Runnin' just feel very swampy. Lying in a Coma brings out Australian Outback with a didgeridoo. The most common thread between a lot of these songs is just how aquatic they sound, though. Animal Collective can often sound very aquatic with how washed out they sound, but here it's very prevalent. A lot of the songs just sound wet, underwater, or very humid. And coupled with the lyrics and the general vibe of a lot of the songs, it just makes it much more of a summer album. I mean, shoot, track 4 is all about summer. The next and arguably most important aspect of this album's sound is the vocals. Like I mentioned with Strawberry Jam, Panda Bear's solo album Person Pitch had a huge influence on their next few albums. The two most important components to Person Pitch was the sample-based nature of the music and the vocals. The very Brian Wilson-esque vocal harmonies. But there wasn't too much vocal influence on Strawberry Jam. A lot of it was very typical AV singing, just more poppy AV singing. Here though, both AV and Panda are using vocal harmonies on almost every song. And it is way more prevalent, even more than on Person Pitch. Songs like Almost Frightened and Guy's Eyes just sound like straight up Beach Boys worship. And again, from the very electronic, rhythmic, sample-like nature of the instrumentation, to the general wild, tribal, aquatic, summery sense of the album, to the very specific vocal style, Animal Collective have once again put out something that just doesn't sound much like anything else they put out. This was my first Animal Collective album, and I expected it to be just typical of them. So of course, when I started from the beginning, I was really put off. It's like there's several different groups at once. However, as soon as I came full circle back to Merriweather post Pavilion, I really noticed a lot of the influence from the earlier projects on this album. A lot of the common threads from the early stuff just show up in different ways. And sometimes I find it a bit weird when people consider this the most essential Animal Collective album, because in terms of representing their entire sound, this doesn't really do it justice. Because I feel like Feels or Strawberry Jam covers a lot more of their broader scope. This was a very specific era for Animal Collective that didn't really continue on to their next album, and was only somewhat prevalent on the previous. So it's obvious when people describe Animal Collective as that weird pop group that loves Beach Boys that they probably only heard this album. It's time to start talking track by track. In the Flowers is one of their best songs. And if it wasn't for Peace Boys, I'd say it's their best opener overall. There's just this moment where the climax gives way and it's just this very transcendental feeling. That's important to note actually. There's several moments on this album that just sound very transcendental and life-affirming. After 2 minutes of building anticipation, it just erupts into electronic loops and big pounding drums. The subtle changes throughout both sections make the song so much better. The sampling almost makes you feel like you're at some sort of event on a summer night, and the climax might be like a fireworks show or something. Then you get My Girls, which is their most popular song. I don't want to say it's undeserved, but I do think there's better, even on this album. It's still a great track, but it's got the most repetitive instrumental on the album, and the lyrics aren't as strong as they are on the other songs. Then you got Also Frightened, which I didn't really think about all that much at first, but it's got some of the most Beach Boys-esque melodies, and they have really grown on me over time. It's also got one of the most aquatic sounding instrumentals, which also at times can sound pretty cosmic. I think it's something about the Then you got Summertime Clothes, Great summer song. One of the catchiest, poppiest songs on the album. I love Summertime Clothes. I just don't see anything wrong with it. Honestly, not sure why Summertime Clothes isn't their most popular song, because I definitely understand that more than my girls. Then you got Daily Routine, one of my favorite Panda Bear vocal tracks. It starts pretty upbeat with a very in-your-face, jangly electronic sound. Panda Bear's vocals are super catchy, and then it transitions into a second half which is much more ambient. Once again, there they still are with the ambient sections. The track just ends very spacey, beautiful, and calm, and it feeds very nicely into Blueish, one of their most successful romantic tracks. If it wasn't for the purple bottle, I'd say Blueish is my favorite love song of theirs. I don't know, it just goes about it in a very wholesome way, and I like that. It just sounds very tender and genuine. And it's another one of those songs that sounds like it's underwater. Then you have the very surfy Guy's Eyes. This is one of those tracks where you can't deny the Beach Boys influence. And this one also grew on me over time, didn't think of it much at first either. Then you've got Taste with a very joyous and triumphant sounding electronic instrumental. The lyrics are a bit of Animal Collective's weird definition of philosophical, but its joyousness and melodicness is what sells it for me. One of the stronger tracks in my opinion. Then you've got the most wild song on the album, Lying in a Coma. From the 9/8 time signature to the bouncy didgeridoo, this song's just a wild one to hear. And it stands out a lot from the tracks that surround it. It's definitely the goofiest song on the album too, which kind of sticks out in a bit of a negative way. Merriweather post Pavilion is way more toned down and serious sounding than their other albums. So Lying in a Coma almost sounds like it belongs on a different album. It's still a good track, and it leads directly into the slowest song on the album, No More Runnin'. This track's very murky sounding, very swampy. A lot of the vocals sound way in the background. In a different way, it also kind of sounds like it belongs on a different album. I don't want to call it a pace killer though, because I do feel like it makes the last track even better. Going into the final track, Brother Sport, after No More Runnin', is way more exhilarating. It's the longest song on the album, and it's got two repetitious but very good sections. There's a giddiness to the opening vocals that kind of reminds me of the Sungtongs era, and then the song sets up this very fun electronic groove. And there's a solid minute and a half of this groove just repeating, slowly morphing over time. A lot of different elements are added and dropped to the sound. By the end of this section, it's just emitting so much hype. And the last half of the song is a very great repeated verse with the same kind of morphing electronic grooviness. It's a great closer to the album, and it sounds like this weird little victory chant of sorts, like the album's grand finale. But this little era doesn't stop there, because Animal Collective released a very excellent EP that coincided with this album in 2009. Merriweather was released in January, but near the end of the year in November they released Fall Be Kind. There's 5 tracks, and a lot of it is much slower than we'd expect on Merriweather post Pavilion, which is probably the only reason why it wasn't on the album, because these songs are excellent. Even though they're B-sides, they don't sound like B-sides, and they have the same quality as the stuff that's on the album. There's sections here and there that sound way more upbeat, like they could have been on Merriweather post Pavilion, such as the last half of the first 2 tracks, but overall it's got a much more toned down, much more moody sound to it. They're very much in the same vein though, and I definitely recommend, if you love Merriweather and you haven't checked out this EP yet, check it out, please. And so then you reach the end of the 00s. Animal Collective had been without a doubt one of the most innovative, consistent, and interesting groups out of the decade. Just nothing could compete with them when they were on their golden run. And that's all I really have to say about that. Thanks for watching. Tune in next time when the boys ruin their golden run.
I have a Discord, it's pretty funny.